Good morning, it's Jonathan Scott on John's D&D vlog number 7. Today I was going to talk about storytelling. So far up until now we've learned all the basics on how to run combats and how to do spell casting and the materials you're going to need, and that's all good, but that's really that's the very basics of role playing. And now we're going to get into what I consider to be the exciting part, which is like storytelling. Okay, you get to actually be a writer. I mean, when I first started doing Dungeons and Dragons, it was cool because when we didn't really know what we were doing, but nonetheless, you roll the dice and you say, "Oh, you're in a room. Oh, there's stuff there that's trying to kill you. Oh, you find a big sword." I mean, they tell you all these things, and you start seeing a movie in your head, right? The thing is, once you get a little bit farther into the game, you realize that there are things that you can do to make the game a fuller and much more interesting experience, right? So it's not just people beating up on other stuff. It's an actual storyline, right? So today I was going to talk about how to do that a little bit. I can only tell you the basics. I'm going to talk about some of the modules that have already been made. I mean, these are all really old because first edition and second edition is no longer the current edition, but nonetheless, these you got to understand what the guys who made D&D were trying to do. They were trying to take classical literature or something that felt like classical literature and make it something that people could walk around in and experience, that you could affect the outcome of the story. It was more than just people beating up on stuff. They were actually trying to create a novel that you could interact with. So I'm going to go through some of the older modules and show what they were trying to do, right? So the first one, the one that everybody knows about, right, because it came in the expert set, it's called the Isle of Dread. What you got to realize is it's not just an island where there's a lot of big stuff and your character's walking through trying to kill things. This is actually King Kong. You got to realize they were trying to recreate King Kong. I mean, the movie from the 30s, and then recently remade by Peter Jackson. There's no big giant gorilla in here, but nonetheless, this is the environment that they were trying to let your players run around in and explore. And it does a really good job. And of course, it's not strictly King Kong. They do change things quite a bit. But nonetheless, as you're running through this campaign, think about that. What would it be like to actually be in the King Kong movie and you be one of the characters running around? There's a few others that I saw that had very straight comparisons to classical literature. This one, of course, it's Ravenloft, which is, of course, Dracula, written by Bram Stoker. So watch Dracula and see what you think about it. And then as you try to do this one, make it feel like that, a big, huge, old, apparently abandoned castle where there's this one creepy guy running around trying to make your life hard, This is module EX2, The Land Beyond the Magic Mirror. I've never played it, but it appears to be Through the Looking Glass, Alice in Wonderland, the whole storyline written by Lewis Carroll. They tried to take that and turn it into a module, right? I mean, honestly speaking, when everybody who's read Lewis Carroll reads it, it's like the guy was on a drug trip, right? So basically, they're trying to give that same experience to your players in this module, which is very intriguing. Okay. I don't do drugs. I've never actually played through this one either, but what it appears to be is the island of Dr. Moreau. Val Kilmer and Marlon Brando made a movie of it, but it was a story originally written by H.G. Wells. I mean, you just got to realize this, okay? So you got Lewis Carroll and Bram Stoker and King Kong and H.G. Wells. The guys who originally made D&D weren't wimpy. They were trying to take the meatiest and the hardiest of all literature and turn it into stories that your players can run around in effect. So when you are making your modules or running your modules, realize that and make it feel like that for your audience. These guys, they're not just running through rooms killing monsters and collecting treasure. There's actually some very big, interesting things happening. So today I was going to talk about the plot. There's actually two different types of writing you're going to have to get into when you do these modules or when you make your own modules, right? The first type of writing you're going to have to do is the basic plot line, the storytelling. where you sit down and you figure out the maps and you figure out what's in the rooms and you try to figure out the theme of the entire storyline, right? So that's what I'm going to talk about today. And then next week I'm going to talk about ad-libbing, which is the other part of storytelling. And honestly speaking, it's harder because you have to know what to do right then, right there on the fly. But today I'm just going to talk about building the plot. Okay? So the basics of storytelling. Okay? What I'm about to talk to you about is actually very old, and it doesn't apply just to role-playing. It applies to all writing. And in every story, I mean, these are conventions that have been around for like thousands of years. But if you know about these things, you're going to understand the basics of making a story, and it'll make sense to your players, and it will make sense to you to a much greater degree. When I took a movie class in college, they talked about the two essential parts of every given story. You've got the protagonist, and you've got the antagonist. The good guys and the bad guys. The guys wearing the black hats and the guys wearing the white hats, okay? So your heroes, of course, are going to be the protagonists, hopefully. And then over here you've got the antagonist, the guy who's giving you problems. So in King Kong, the antagonist is not King Kong. The antagonist, of course, is those 5 planes at the end of the movie and stupid people in general, right? It was actually very interesting because protagonist, antagonist, they showed it from both sides. So, okay, whatever. So you've got your heroes and you've got the people that they're fighting against, or the situation that they're fighting against, or the whatever that they're fighting against, okay? And then after that, you should look at all of stories as 3-act plays. Three-act plays, right? So every given story on the planet is divided up into 3 different parts. And as a rule, I mean, it's pretty set. You've always got it going like this. You've got the setup, right? And then you've got the confrontation, and then you've got the final resolution. And at the end of the resolution, there's this thing called the payoff. And the payoff isn't an act. It's just the happy ending, or the final end, the thing that terminates the story, which in most Western literature is, I mean, the stuff that everybody likes to see. It's usually something happy. Okay? So I'm going to talk about these just a little bit more. You got the setup. And in the setup, you take your characters and you put them into your particular world, and you show them a problem. This is usually where the heroes first encounter the villain, okay? But then after that, you've got the confrontation. That's where the heroes and the villain, the antagonist and the protagonist, they clash. And they clash in many different ways, and you find out more about the heroes and you find out more about the antagonist as the story progresses through the second act. The second act is extremely important. That's where that's where the meat and potatoes of the entire story are going to happen, right? And then after all that, you've got the final resolution. That's where the heroes finally find a way to either get rid of the antagonist or to see to it that he's no longer the antagonist, or to somehow solve the problem, right? And then that's where the story climax shows up, which should be the most exciting. In video games, it's usually called the boss fight. And then you've got the payoff, where the guy finds the big treasure chest, or somebody gets something cool, or there's power, glory, fame, something, right? And then the story ends, and you move on to the next story, right? So I was going to do some comparisons. Oh, actually, before I do that, I once heard a guy describe these 3 acts. So there used to be these things called Pulp Fiction magazines. I mean, the movie Pulp Fiction came from a magazine type that was really common back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. They were called Pulp Fictions. And I heard one guy explain the basic theme of all Pulp Fiction stories. So, Act 1, a guy finds himself in trouble, right? And then the second act, a guy gets into even deeper trouble, right? And then the third act, a guy almost dies but successfully manages to get out of trouble. So that's the basic 3-play act, right? So I was going to compare this to some popular stories, right? So like Dumbo. In Dumbo, the setup is Dumbo's mom is taken away from him, and Dumbo has to grow up with mean people. So that's how you get your readers into the world and show them that there's a problem, right? And then it goes to the confrontation. Dumbo, who's trying to figure out how to survive in this antagonistic world full of mean people, he tries to do something big, and he causes a lot of damage, and he makes it so, I mean, he costs the circus a lot of money. He's eventually given a position of great degradation of being a clown, right? And then in the resolution, he learns how to fly, and he does so during one of the circus performances. And then he makes the circus a lot of money, and his mom gets out of jail, and he gets his own train car, and he's rich and he's famous, and everybody's happy. So that's the payoff at the very end, right? In The Wizard of Oz, you've got the setup. Dorothy gets transported to a new weird world and accidentally, completely accidentally, makes a mortal enemy, right? And then the confrontation, the witch and Dorothy, the witch is basically just trying to kill Dorothy over and over and over again to find all these. And you find out how deep the anger of the witch goes, and Dorothy keeps escaping, but the witch keeps attacking. And then at the end of the confrontation, Dorothy goes to the wizard and asks for help, but the wizard says, no, go kill her, right? And then at the resolution, Dorothy actually goes into the witch's castle and kills the witch. And then she gets to go home, and going home is the payoff. Well, actually, there's tons of payoffs, because all the main characters get some present from the wizard, and Dorothy gets to go home. Anyway, and like Star Wars, right? You got a setup. A farm boy's family gets killed when he unknowingly brings two androids into his home. It just so happens that those androids, the Empire is searching for them, right? So antagonism gets itself set up. And in the confrontation, Luke, he gathers up a bunch of friends and is eventually trapped in a space station, but he does eventually find a way to fight his way out. And then the resolution, right? It just so happens inside those two droids are the plans for the space station. And they give those plans to the rebellion, and the rebellion finds a way to destroy the Death Star. And everyone lives happily ever after. They get medals. There's the payoff until, of course, The Empire Strikes Back shows up, and then whatever, you do it all over again. So those are the basics. You've got the protagonist and you've got the antagonist. And then those are the two main forces that are going to occur in your story, but then you've also got those three aspects: the setup, the confrontation, and the resolution. I could talk about this for a really long time, but I don't want to bore you. If you just look at those pieces and then you look at stories, you'll be able to figure it out for yourself. It really is a common way of doing storytelling. I mean, it's like the most common way. Okay? Before I end this blog, and today it's just me talking, I'm sorry, I'll try to show graphics and stuff to make it more interesting, but there's a really good site to check out, and here, I'm going to show it to you. This is a homepage called the Periodic Table of Storytelling. It appears to have been written by a man named James Harris. I don't know anything about him. I don't know anything about this page other than I visit it from time to time and look at things. But what this basically does is takes all the different elements of storytelling. So like a five-man band, right? Or an evil laugh, or sealed evil in a can. So it takes all these popular elements of story writing and shows you what each one of those elements is. Think about they call these things tropes. Think about tropes as like an atom, right? That's why it's the periodic table of storytelling. Think about it as like an atom, and if you take several atoms and you stick it together, you'll get a molecule or a story, right? So if we go down here and we look at Star Wars, for example, right? It has 6 of these different elements in it. And when you put it all together, it gives you a good idea of what you would need to do to write Star Wars, right? But if you come over here to Ghostbusters, it's got a completely different set of stuff, right? Sealed evil in a can. I assume that has to deal with all the ghosts that they had in that collection area that get freed by the bureaucrat. Hilarity ensues. 5-man band. Mad scientist. Okay. So anyway, it just shows you all the different elements that need to go together in order to make a story. And then when you're writing your story, you can look here to see what you can add to your story that will make it more compelling. Okay? I like this site because it's a great place to go to study, but honestly speaking, I don't like this site at the same time because it's like a corporation got a hold of something and then they perfected it until it doesn't even have a soul anymore. This pages like this make me feel like there's nothing left to be invented. And as a writer, you want to be inventing, right? So it kind of takes
the fun out of it. So hats off to the guy who made the site. I'm just being overly picky. It's a good site. Anyway, I hope you check it out. If you're going to get into writing, you actually kind of need this. So this week I talked about making your plots and all the different elements that you'll need to consider as you make your plot. And I hope that was helpful. But next week we're going to talk about something even harder. It's called ad-libbing. And you need to get actually kind of good at it, but I'll show you some tricks and tips that you can use to make it go easier for you. If you don't do a good job, you tend to get a lot of players looking at you weird and rolling their eyes. It's not a lot of fun, but if you can ad-lib right, a lot of people don't realize it, but it's actually kind of miraculous. Anyway, that's it for this week. I'll see you again next week. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.